everyone. I am Bara Sapir of City Test Prep, and welcome to MBA Waves. We're on the air. MBA Waves is your weekly vidcast discussing all things streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And unfortunately, today, Eric won't be joining us because he had a prior concert that he's performing in. So he wasn't able to change that around, but he's with us in spirit. And hi, Eric. He'll watch later, and I'm sure he's going to have more questions and things to add. So this is probably part one of a couple of these talks. And today I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Bara Sapir, like I said, City Test Prep and Mindflow. And I'm super excited to have my two colleagues and friends with us. I've known Candy and Marlene for over 10 years, and I'm excited that they're with us. Marlene Corcoran is with Athena Mentor, and she looks at the long view of business education. And Candy Lee LaBalle of LaBalle Admissions has been taking the mystery and misery out of MBA admissions since 2005. So I welcome you, and I welcome everyone to remind you that today's episode, we're talking about finding your person, finding your admissions consultant person. So I'd love for both of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are and where you're at, because that's super exciting for this COVID-bound San Franciscan New Yorker.
Great. Marlene, do you want to go first since you start with them earlier and I get them later?
That makes sense.
I'm located in Munich. I'm a native New Yorker, but I've lived in Munich for 20 years, and I have business bases both in New York City and in Munich. And as Bara said, I take the long view on business education. I often start working with people as they begin high school. Candy and I are twins in that I think you can take a lot of the misery out of MBA applications if you start thinking about your entire educational path a lot sooner.
Wonderful.
So true. Well, thank you. I am also a transplant in Europe. I am a native New Orleanian from New Orleans, Louisiana, but I've been in Madrid about 20 years. I work from here with clients around the world. My main focus is MBA admissions, so people who are applying to an MBA program. And like you said, I try to take the mystery and the misery out of it, which just means I help people through the process from A to submit.
Perfect. Thank you. So can you both of you, just give me a quick definition of what is an admissions consultant? Like, let's start at the basics. What is an admissions consultant?
I'll start then. So admissions consultant is someone who helps someone else who is applying for a master or an MBA or a different type of program. So our job is just like you have a coach for a sports team or a consultant for someone else. We help you through the process. So on the side of MBA admissions, which is where I do it, I might help them figure out which school to choose, how to present themselves to the school, how to update their resume, how to write their essays, how to find the right fit, how to do their interviews. So anything involved with applying, I would help them through the process. And also, I say take the misery out because there's a point where it is miserable. It's not always fun and it can be quite stressful. So I'm there to kind of help you deal with that as well. Marlene, would you agree?
I would certainly agree. It's horrible. And if you're working with an admissions consultant, you know that it's not her first rodeo. So a lot of the things that cause often unnecessary stress are there questions to which we really do know the answers because we've been there before. So in that sense, an admissions consultant is what we call in German, someone who walks beside you through the whole process. And I start much younger with people who generally know that they would like a career in business, but they often have stereotypical ideas about what they should do in order to get where they want to go.
Interesting. What are some of those? What are some of those stereotypical ideas?
Yes. Let's start with an easy one. High school students often think that what counts most in college admissions is really glamorous sounding internships. And yet we know that it's very rare for a 15 or 16-year-old person to be given substantial responsibility on an internship, that it's really better for them to ask for scut work. Some kind of assignment where they're going to gain skills, usually mathematical skills, sometimes very basic skills in how to be the lowest person on the totem pole, not the top person on the totem pole. Another common error is to think that if you want a career in business, you should major in business. And it starts even in high school here with, instead of taking what would really help, they take business studies. And again, it sounds like the right thing, but it's often not. They'd be better off taking higher level mathematics.
Interesting. I love the long view that you're talking about here, right? And I love the continuity that we're talking about as well. I think it's really interesting. So why would someone hire an admissions consultant? Candy, you went into it a little bit, but why would they hire somebody to help them with this particular part of the application process?
Yeah. So you have to remember that most people are hiring an admissions consultant or looking to go into a very elite program. They're not hiring to go to local community college. They want to go to Harvard. They want to go to Stanford or Yale or whatnot. And the admission rates are very, very low.
Ooh, we lost your voice. We lost your sound. Marlene, can you say something to see?
I could pick up on that and say that in such a situation, I let Harvard do the heavy lifting. Just show people what the admissions rates are. That gives them both the understanding that the admissions rates are low, but they're not zero, because in my view, I mean, even Harvard has to admit somebody or they're not going to have a school. So the challenge is to find out how, with the help of an admissions consultant, you can really make the most out of your particular story when you are applying to maximize your personal chances of getting in.
That's interesting. You use the word story, right? I think that's a really important, I think that's a really pivotal word that could blip by really quickly. So I'd love to hear what both of you have to say about the word story. Candy, let's make sure that your microphone is working. Are you there?
Okay, I didn't touch anything, so I'm not sure what happened.
Technology. Okay.
Okay, so story, that's really good. So people hire us to help them through a process that is extremely, extremely competitive. And at the same time, the return on investment is massive. You know, it's going to change the trajectory of your life, your children's life, and your grandchildren's life. That's how profound it can be. So how do you stand out? People often say to me like, oh, can I get in? Look at my stats. Well, I work at McKinsey. I have a 720 GMAT, and I volunteered in the Boys and Girls Club. And what I say to them is like, yeah, you and everyone else. Like everyone who's applying is a superstar. That's the absolute truth. But they are not you. So there's a wonderful quote from Dr. Seuss that I love, which says, there's no one alive who is youer than you. And that's where you stand out. And how do you stand out? To be you, you tell your own story. So whether that's a story about where you come from, a story about what you believe, a story about what you want to do, a story about a regret in your life, a story about family history, it's about being personal, because everyone's a McKinsey superstar. How are you going to be different? You know?
Right. So
I agree with you completely, Candy, that the first level you need to meet is quantitative. You have to have a certain range of numbers to get into the ballpark, but then it's up to you to play ball. Because as you said, there are so many candidates with virtually identical quantitative profiles. I sometimes feel sorry for admissions committees, because how are they supposed to tell these people apart? So if you can, with the help of someone else figure out what your story is, then they can at least see who you are. Because in order to choose you, they have to be able to see you. And that's where the story comes in.
So it sounds like one of the great qualities of an admissions consultant is to actually help you cultivate that story. If we were going to think of different traits of what you want to look for.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very difficult to see yourself. We rarely see what our own characteristics are, and people rack their brains about strengths and weaknesses, but it's really more about characteristics. How could I tell this person apart from that person? And as the three of us have heard so often, admissions committees don't think of themselves as rejecting people. They think of themselves as putting together a class. So they need different types of people, and it's your job to tell them how you would fill out their picture. And I think that's where another person can help to serve as a sounding board.
Yeah. And part of it's not encouraging to tell their story is one part of it, but almost everything else we do in our lives, job interviews, trying to get a grant, pitching a startup, it's about selling how great you are. I graduated #1. Look how great I am. I'm the best. I'm the best. And it's like the MBA world is totally different. That's not what you're selling. You're selling your uniqueness, your vulnerability, the resilience, the things that, and so sometimes that to get over that hump can be quite a challenge for people. People often contact me after they've written essays and like, take a look at this. And I'm like, but you've just rewritten your entire resume in an essay that asks you to express yourself, you know? And so I think it's hard for them to realize that, like, get away from that. Stop trying to sell yourself and be authentic.
So that brings an interesting foil, right? Because when you hire an admissions consultant, you don't want the admissions consultant, that you want them to be a leader, right? And in some ways they need to model what's unique about them or what they're going to offer the student. So what are the kinds of questions that a potential MBA applicant, potential client would ask to find out who would be a great admissions consultant for them?
That's such a difficult question because the reality is they usually ask questions that are not relevant. You know, they usually ask questions. I get calls all the time for people who want to know, well, what was their success rate last year? How many clients went to Stanford? And it's like, that's irrelevant. That's not you. And this year is not last year. And that doesn't matter. So I think it's more about just finding the questions about what appeals to you as a person. It's like hiring a coach or a therapist. You have to have a feeling with them. So do you need someone who's more hands-on? Do you need someone who's more personal? What do you need? I don't know. What's the question? Marlene, any idea?
Some of my strongest qualifications, if I dare say so, for helping someone else figure out their story, it's a question no one would ever think of asking me as an admissions consultant. But fun fact here, I have published 3 plays. And in order to write a play, you have to construct a different voice for every character. They can't all sound like the same person. That's not a play. So it's a skill that transfers over from a very unexpected practice into something that's really perfect to help other people figure out what their story is for MBA admissions.
Yeah. And I'm getting away from that. Right?
You have a background also that's unusual. That is a complete.
Yes, I have a background in anthropology, specifically carnival practices. So I studied carnival around the world. There's not a lot of jobs in that, unfortunately. I thought maybe there would be, but and then after that I pivoted into writing, and I was a writer for about 15, 20 years as well. I wrote a couple of plays, they didn't get published. But that was okay. But outside of the storytelling, I think, you know, if you're looking for, what do you need to find from it? You need to find someone who knows what they're doing, I think. And that could probably be figured out with a few key questions, you know, asking someone, you know, well, here's my I want to do this. What school do you think? And a good admissions consultant should be able to say, oh, you want to do that? You need to look at Duke's program that does this. Oh, Ross has a great one that does that. And Harvard could be very interesting, but they need to be able to answer these questions. And so that would be something you could ask in an intake session about, like, what schools would you recommend for me, and that sort of thing.
Right, because an admissions consultant is not only working on your story, but they're also helping craft a path, right? They're also helping to craft the organization, the scheduling, they might or they might not talk to the candidate before they take their GMAT, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might say, get back to me, we can discuss the school choice after we see this data point, right? And I've had students come to me who are looking at a couple of schools in Boston, and they thought they might want to go to one, but then they went to the other one and they just liked the culture more. And an admissions consultant might know what's happening in the different cultures at the schools, which is, it sounds like a partner, right? You're getting partnered up. It's a coach. It's like all the words that the two of you are saying. So where on the journey do you recommend folks seek out this kind of support?
Well, Marlene, you need to start because.
Well, I'm sort of an outlier on this because I think a good time would be 10th grade. But that's again because I tend to accompany people for a much longer journey. But honestly, that is the point at which you need to start really tuning up your math skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole lot easier to do better in college level math and on the GMAT if you just get used to thinking of math as not a big deal earlier in your life. So if parents are wondering, what can I do for my child? Instead of the glamorous superficial things, think of the fundamental things.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice.
Also for college students, the second year of college is not too soon. Not only because here in Europe, I'm sure Candy will agree, people tend to think of a master's degree as contiguous with a bachelor's degree. So they want to go right into a Master of Business Administration. Not necessarily the greatest idea, but if you're taking a math course in college, you take that GMAT, and that score is good for a few years. It's one more thing that you don't have to worry about later on. It will make everything easier for you.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to how to choose a good consultant. You have that focus on math. I take people later in the process. So someone who's going to contact me for an MBA, dream situations, they contact me at least a year ahead, because with a year ahead, I can do a lot to position them in terms of helping them figure out ways to improve their leadership or ways to improve their impact. But honestly, if someone contacts me 3 months ahead and they've been, following their career, because these people are applying for an MBA, they're not idiots. They know what they're doing, and so they're coming to me prepared. So with 3 months, we can do a lot. But knowing that when an admissions consultant can look at your profile and say, "Whoa, you got a quant issue here, and that's going to be a problem for admissions. You know what? Here are 5 resources off the top of my head that you can do tomorrow to improve that quant score." And admissions consultant needs to know that, and we should, and we do. So.
And those things are not irreparable. They can be fixed, they can be strengthened, but you need to give yourself time to do that. Even in terms of constructing a story, if you've got a story that looks, I don't know, greenish, but it needs a little more yellow, if you have time, you would have time to, say, undertake some significant volunteer activity that might strengthen your case that you really fit the green idea.
So I'm interested in knowing, since we've all been part of AIGAC the past many years, AIGAC is an association of graduate admissions consultants international. And there's a wide range of folks that are in our cast, right? And there's folks that are individuals and they work on their own. And then there's these huge houses. So how would you classify the differences, if you can, because both of you are smaller solopreneurs. But for someone who's listening, their question might be, well, who would I go to? Would I, and I get that question also, should I go to a big test prep company, you know, where there's lots of different tutors, or do I go to a single practitioner? So one, who makes up, you know, what are some of the demographics, I guess I would say kind of demographics of the folks that make up this? And what are some of the things people should be thinking about as they speak to either a small house or a smaller house?
Well, the
When you're
demographic.
approaching,
Sorry,
go ahead, Candy.
I was going to say, I didn't quite get your demographic reference, but I don't, you know, again, it comes down to, you know, you're hiring someone to help you through a process. You need to know what you need, what works best for you. Example out of the blue, I have a gym in my house, but I cannot work out. So I pay a guy and I go to his gym and he screams at me. And if he doesn't scream at me, I am not happy. I don't want him saying, good job, Candy, take a break. I know what I need. So you need to know what you need and then go for it. So if you hire a big house, yeah, you're going to get a lot of resources that come with a big house, such as extra consultants, resources. I don't know what other things I might have. If you hire a small person, you might be hiring more closeness. I don't know. It's just very different, I think.
Right. And different people want different things, right? So I know that, you know, at a bigger place, I would imagine that if it doesn't work out with a consultant, they could just switch you over real quick.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, perfect.
And but in a smaller situation, if it doesn't work out, and it might not work out, but there is that intimacy, I think, when it's a small.
And there is a network even for a solopreneur. People should be assured that we talk to one another. As you said, that AIGAC is a large organization, and I have no problem picking up WhatsApp to talk to Candy if I feel that I need specialized advice about something. And I know that there's an intense talk circuit among the solopreneurs in AIGAC.
Absolutely. I think that's a big thing, that we're not working in isolation. So even if we are independents, you know, I think all three of us are part of a WhatsApp group of 30 people around in Brazil and in Colombia and all over the world. And it doesn't matter whatever issue my clients have. If I don't have the answer is literally a couple of clicks away. So that's something we have. Bigger houses probably have that in-house. You know, they have that in-house. So that's, I think, a nice advantage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
One thing that's relatively easy in approaching an individual consultant like Candy or myself is you can research that person on the internet, and you know that that's the person who is going to be working with you. I encourage people to read whatever the person publishes. Candy, how often do you publish on LinkedIn?
Well, for 2 years, I published every single day. And now I probably publish like twice a month. So I kind of got slower.
And it's not just motivational quotes, people. It is I mean, it could be a section of a chapter on an MBA admissions tome. And it's what you need to know at that moment in a cycle. So you can read the person's information. Do they sound like they know what they're talking about? Ms. Candy is definitely yes. And you can judge the tone of the person's correspondence or writing. It's not only what they say, but how they say it. What kind of perspective does the person have? Where are they coming from culturally? Do you feel this is a person who understands you? I mean, Germany is a very specific culture. It borders on France. They might as well be on the moon from one another. So you can tell from a person's writing what the tone of your relationship might well be. That's why I publish 2 newsletters, and I would be very happy if people would subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. It is, in fact, subtitled playing the long game. We're taking the long view on business education, and that way you get to know what I think about what's going on in business education, and especially the MBA space these days.
You know, two things. One, Marlene, please put your information about the LinkedIn newsletter in the comments. And I also want to just show this comment that just showed up. We've got a couple comments from some LinkedIn users. I don't have a name, just a LinkedIn user. It's very anonymous, but you know, someone who's agreeing about vetting the specific consultant at a large firm and not just rely on the brand. But you know, brands do say something, but it is important to vet. And also, this came in earlier. It's also might be the same LinkedIn user, but that one of the biggest parts of this person's job is talking to people. I think it's an admissions consultant. That into being more vulnerable and authentic. Oh, it's Farrell. Hi, Farrell. And
who is it?
It's Farrell.
Farrell. Yay. I love Farrell. This is exactly what I agreed. This is what we were talking about earlier. It's not enough to sit there and write an essay about how freaking fantastic you are, because all applicants are fantastic. So that's really true.
But what is this
about vetting people? That's also a little difficult because you can refer to rankings. You know, there's rankings in Poets and Quants and in GMAT Club and different places. I think really a good thing, and I like when applicants do this to me, is they ask to speak to an old client. And honestly, about 70% of my clients are referrals. They're coming from other people who already know me. But that's a really good way, you know, ask to speak to someone who worked with that person before, you know? And if you're worried that they're going to give you like a staged one, go to LinkedIn, because now it's very common that a client who's admitted is linking into the admissions consultant. So go to LinkedIn and say, hey, did you work with Bob? Can I ask you? I think that's a wonderful way to do it.
I vet everybody. I vet my handymen and my handy women. I think it's really important to get a sense of who people are when they're not expecting to be vetted. And so you can really get a good read on who you're going to be working with. I think it's super important. But I started saying before, what's the cost to even the range? Like, what does something like hiring someone to help you along with this, what are the fees that are typically can be expected?
Well, they can find those by going to Poets and Quants and going directly to Poets and Quants has an admissions consultant section where they list everyone's prices. And on average, $250 an hour to $600 an hour is something like that. I know there's some consultants that charge more than that. There's consultants that charge less, and then there's application packages can anywhere from $3,000 up to $10,000. It's an investment, but as a good friend of mine named Marlene once told me, it's an investment that's worth it, because pay that investment, get into Wharton, and again, you know, the return on investment. Not only are you walking away with a 6-figure salary post graduation, but you've changed the trajectory of your family. Everything going forward is like coming from this sense of this higher education, this better financial status. It's worth the investment.
Yeah, that is taking the long view on the investment. You may have come across the same issue that I do in Europe, Candy. People really don't understand the difference, both in terms of salary and in terms of life, that attending a really top business school can make for you. Germans are really excellent at counting the investment and not the return. So make sure that you look at something neutral like Forbes. How long does it take to not only pay back the investment in the tuition that you'll pay, but also the opportunity cost that you're not working for 2 years? And how soon after that will you start realizing sheer financial profit for the rest of your life? And it's sooner than you think at the top schools, really sooner than you think. So I encourage people to do that research. What is it going to mean to them if they get in? And also go ahead.
I was gonna say that's another reason you would choose an admissions consultant, because, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding. I mean, I know in your world they're going for the Ivies. In my world, it's Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. And they don't realize that, you know what? You can go to Tuck and get just as great of a return on investment, or Ross or Georgetown. It really depends on what it is that you need and what you want to do. And it's important, I think, as a admissions consultant, that we know that. We're able to say, you know, wait a minute.
Yeah, I also tell students when we talk about preparing for tests that it's not just getting the score to get in, but if they get a good enough score, they might get funding, right? And so that they're even though they're front loading the cost of getting that better score, and they're bringing that at the beginning of their process, that if they wind up having a great scholarship, like all of a sudden it's like you hit the lotto, right? It makes a big difference. I also talk about with GMAT and students taking the GMAT that it's like a dance, and that the way that you approach each question is, this is your dance partner and you want to focus on your dance partner at that time. And I think working with a consultant is the same way, but you get to choose who you dance with, right? And the client is choosing you, but likewise, you're also choosing them. So how does a consultant actually determine if they want to take on a client?
I have one more thing to say about your question about fees, Bara, which is folded into the entire cost of the MBA, and then suddenly it assumes its rightful place in the big picture, or as I always say, in the long view.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
True.
And yes, we are also dancing or committing to dance with the clients that we accept. It's essential that the person be someone I think I can help, or who's ready to accept advice. So that works both ways. Make sure if you're the prospective client, make sure that the consultant is someone from whom you feel you could accept advice. And my question to myself is always, is this a person who could take advice?
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly important. I would imagine you'd want someone who is respectful of your time too, right? Like if you had someone who was reaching out to you and not being respectful before they've even hired you, you might have pause whether they'd be a good fit.
I mean, if it's if it's someone reaching out and they're being, you know, they're sending out a 500-word email, you know, and they send the same exact email to 15 of us, and you know, we do talk to each other, so we know this happens. You can kind of get a sense like, oh, okay. Or they make appointments that they don't show up to or whatever. But I think once the connection's made, at least for me, the time is irrelevant. I'm going to be there for them. But who would I reject as a client? Someone who's got completely irrational ideas that literally want something that's never going to happen, and they're just adamant about it. I had an intake call the other day with a guy who told me, I told him something about a certain business school, Columbia, and he's like, well, how do you know that? Like, I don't know, 17 years of trucking along, kind of picked it up. So that makes me think like maybe we're not the best fit. Or, you know, also I won't take on clients to schools where I don't need my help. Like if I know that they're applying to a place and I'm like, you know, it's not that complicated, I will gladly give them send them a couple of links and say, you know, do this, this, and this, and this, and you should be fine.
Marlene, do you have some no starts?
Someone who wants to apply to one Ivy League school and nowhere else. Yes, they might get in, but I don't want to be standing there when they don't. So I want someone to be open to growing through the process so that they come to see that their world could be much larger and that they could be happy and productive at a number of places because they are the person they are and they have the preparation that they have, and not that they are only interested in the external validation of the name of the school.
Here, I've got a couple of comments here. So, hi, Thomas. Thomas says one type of candidate to avoid are those who want you to write.
Hello to Athens.
Right. So, obviously, if someone's asking you to do something unethical, that's someone that you might not want to bring on at all. And
that's true, but I would say I think in 16 years and I don't know 700, 800 admits, this has happened to me like once or twice. Like really, I think I think the type of people that are already self-selecting for these programs, they get it, you know. But yeah, he's absolutely right. Like, why would you, hire an editor, a ghostwriter? You don't need us.
And then we have, I bet this is Farrell again, that to pick someone that you've got good chemistry with, easy communication, and what you were both talking about, coachability, right? Someone who's which I would imagine that the schools also think about, right? The schools are also thinking about whoever they bring in. So does everybody need a consultant? And are there things people can do on their own with little scaffolding, or even just bringing someone on hourly? Like you were mentioning, there's hourly rates, but there's probably package deals also. But what does everyone need a consultant?
In my opinion, no. And I say that because I know a lot of people who get in without a consultant. There's so many times I have a couple and I work with one half of the couple, but the other one just does it on their own. Or I meet someone who like, oh, my best friend got in on his own, but I feel like I need more help. So I know you don't. It's not rocket science. There is material out there. If you work in a company where the MBA culture is embraced and supported, you have support. There's so many schools. Stanford right now has this wonderful program called My Stanford MBA, where they're coaching you through how to apply. Berkeley has a similar program. Ross, the wonderful outgoing dean of admissions, she had the best advice. So it's out there. You can do it on your own. You don't need a coach. What a coach is going to do is going to save you time for sure, help you be more, laser focused. We're definitely going to help improve your odds because you're not going to make silly mistakes with us on the watch. But yeah, you don't need us. Nobody really needs it, I don't think. So
I think there's excellent general information about how to put together an application. But there will always be that moment when someone asks, but what does that mean for me? And I think that's the moment that you realize you need someone to interpret that for you. Yes, I would agree that a person who very determinedly attends the webinars that are offered by the admissions committee, for example, reads the instructions on the website. I mean, there's an enormous amount of material out there. But at the end of the day, I think almost everyone who is, as Candy said earlier, aiming for one of the top schools, those people, I think there's everything to be said for hiring a consultant.
I often tell people that this is a business decision and indicates their business acuity as well. If they feel like they need someone to help them along because it does the laser focus or streamlines their efforts and organizes, and it's a great business decision. And if you see it as a great business decision, it's modeling the path for yourself that you've made that wise choice, I think. Candy, in the beginning of our talk, you were talking about some myths about admissions consultants. And so I'm curious if either of you have more myths about admissions consultants that you can share with our listeners or watchers about, expertise or how many clients they get in or things like that, buyer beware.
I know one of the questions I get, I get a lot of random emails, they come in with just questions. Here's my profile, what's some questions. And then one of the things they'll often say is, what's your success rate? And I don't even know how to answer that because that's going to depend round to round, year to year. And, what is my success? I don't know how to answer that question. So I don't really know what that means when people ask that, or when you see firms are like, we have a 99.9% success rate. yeah, 99% of my clients get into a school that they are happy with and they're thrilled with. But I always feel like that's a weird question. Like, I don't know how to answer that. I guess it's like going to a therapist and like, how many of your clients, are now living a fulfilling life above their emotional drama?
I think that's a great point. Like for me, I tell students, well, I can guarantee that we teach you everything you need for the test, but you're taking the test. Like you're the person who's showing up for it. Marlena, do you have any myth busters?
Mm-hmm.
The data point you would need is one that is impossible to get, namely, what would have been a particular person's success rate if they hadn't used the consultant? And you'll never know that. So I think that you're not really competing against other people. You're competing against yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we're heading up. We've been talking for about 40 minutes. I want to hear if you have any final advice for folks that are considering admissions consultants as part of their repertoire of helping them apply to business school or college, Marlena, because you're working with students with this long view.
Here's an easy one, but it's huge. Do not expect any consultant who belongs to AIGAC to write your essays for you.
That is true.
Yes, you can buy one. You can buy essays for $25 on the internet.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to help you.
I'm going to post this really fast. Poonam actually wrote this that during a free consultation, they were taken aback when the candidate asked her if they would fill out the application. Of course not, right?
Hi, Poonam.
Someone came hi, Poonam. Once, someone came to me, wanted to work for Athena Mentor, and she listed in writing on her CV as her qualification that she had written the essays for many of her compatriots in a large Asian country. And I thought, this is a disqualification as far as I'm concerned. Clearly, I did not hire her. That is out there. Your AIGAC consultant will not do it. And you should be very glad of that, because what you want is not, as clients sometimes ask me, what do the universities want to hear? They'd like to hear something new. They'd like to hear something original. They'd really like to hear you. And that's the best service that a consultant can do.
I'm laughing because I think I said those words exactly today to a client. I'm like, yes, but everyone's going to say that in their essay. You need to say something new.
I just thought I'd throw this.
Thomas had a good myth.
Yeah.
Thomas has a good myth here.
Yeah. Who do you know?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right.
Well, I'll follow up that question from Thomas. I get that sometimes. People will ask me, can you guarantee me to get in? And I say to them, if I could guarantee you'll get into Harvard, I'd be charging 100,000 euros. I mean, really, I would. No one can guarantee that. It's just not possible. I wish it were, honestly, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of my guests so much for talking today. I feel like there's a lot more to really say and to dig into the weeds. I don't think this is the last that we're going to be discussing how to hire an admissions consultant or how to hire a GMAT or a GRE tutor. So I look forward to continued conversations and even with other AIGAC folks. I think that we have a really great brain trust. And I do want to mention that, Candy, you've been modest in this call, but you have been you were designated as the #1 admissions consultant by Poets and Quants this year, which is a huge, it's a huge honor, and also that's I'm sure that your roster is going to be a lot busier this year because.
But the good thing is that particular ranking, it came from my client reviews, and I fall in love with my client. That's one thing, if you work with me, I'm gonna fall in love with you. It's just probably a guarantee at some point. And then it ends up being mutual at some point. I met a client the other night at his farewell party from Madrid. He's going off to his MBA. And he pulled me aside. He's like, you know, I think there's about 6 people that changed my life, and you're one of them. And I just got so teary. I was like, oh. So, yeah, that feels good.
Yeah, that's lovely. So we're MBA Waves, and we are every week on, I'm going to do this now. Let me see. Oh, I can't do that so easily. I'm going to just say goodbye like this. But we are every Tuesday at 10 a.m. West Coast, 1 p.m. East Coast, and 7 p.m. Paris time. Next week, Eric is going to join us. We have a great show lined up episode, and it's so lovely to share this space with you, Marlena and Candy. It's so lovely to see some of our colleagues on as well. And if anyone has any questions for either Candy or Marlena, please reach out to them, and they will support you in your efforts and help you to help yourself in this process. And I wish everyone a great rest of today. And thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you, Bara.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.